The earlier that you start, whether you save for college, whether you save for goals, the harder it is to make up for the lost time. I mean, compounding is it's the magic dust, we would say, in terms of just being able to be able to really build wealth. Compounding, whether it's holding real estate, whether it's putting money into investments over the long runs. The way to do it is by starting early and doing it often.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Jeffrey Panik. Jeffrey is a certified financial planner and advisor with almost 25 years of experience. He knows that his job helps clients strike a balance between living well today and planning for the future. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about that. But first, I just want to say thanks for coming on the show today. Thanks for taking the time out. I really appreciate you being here.
No, thanks for having me today, Jason. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Why don't we start with just telling your story? Tell people your background, kind of a little bit, walk us through to where you're at today. And then, like I said, I'm sure I'll have lots of questions.
Sure. So I guess you would say I'm probably the first, I'm like a lot of people, first generation college. I was the first person in my family to go to college. So I really didn't have a good understanding of what was really required, not only getting through the college entry process, but also just managing the experience as well as what came afterwards with the loans. I grew up in a single parent family. My father died when I was very young. And so my mother raised me in a very small apartment. We didn't have very much, but she did everything she could for me. And, went to college, was getting out of college, and really wasn't sure what I wanted to do, probably like a lot of people these days that are graduating without really a real good direction. And got a letter from Sallie Mae, which I had no idea who even Sallie Mae was, their loan servicer. And, I thought they were like a magazine subscription or something. And, it said I was going to owe $1,000 a month, a little north of that, for the next 10 years. And, that really got me thinking, try to figure out what direction to go, because I didn't have any, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do for work. And so I ended up going in the Army, where they had a program that paid off the loan, over your service. So it really, really worked out well for me and really helped me find a direction and really have structure where I really didn't have that. And I wrote a book not too long ago, and really, I in some ways, I wrote the book really for myself and what I would have liked to have known, when I was growing up.
Yeah. And I think, right off the bat, a lot of really great points and relatable, right? There's a lot of people that, whatever their family history is, I think most people don't necessarily come into college or out of college with a whole lot of like financial direction. Mm-hmm. And student debt is a big problem. I'm a veterinary surgeon. I'm from the veterinary mm-hmm. world. There's a huge problem with student debt. People coming out of college with, I think I can be sure that a lot of my friends would be happy if they only had to pay $1,000 a month for the next mm-hmm. 10 years. Some people
that is true.
And I personally actually got very lucky on my student loans in terms of the timing. I have a really, really low interest rate. So mm-hmm. But yeah, you go into it and they're like, you want to go to college, you get these loans, sign the paper. Okay. Like I literally didn't think about it. I couldn't have told you how much I was going to owe even when I finished my 8 years of schooling until I got that piece of paper that you talked about. So it's an interesting, I guess, setup where we allow, effectively children to start putting themselves into, pretty substantial debt.
Exactly. And I think the biggest challenge really is just really looking at not really having any real benefit of outcomes, the colleges and universities,
Yeah.
which could make for a real challenge because, in the end, you end up in a situation where, I think back in when I graduated in the mid 90s, student loan debt was probably about 170 billion, which wasn't great. Now it's about 1.9 trillion.
Yeah.
And we argue at some point that something is going to have to break there, because you just can't keep raising prices without having reasonable outcomes. And
Right.
I go back to the alternatives and really where the skill gaps are. And I look at it from the standpoint of saying, there's no shortage of community colleges out there. There's plenty of apprenticeships that are paying a lot more than what you would find if you were just, with a normal Bachelor of Arts degree. Not that there's anything a matter with having the degree, but you really want to have a sense of purpose and direction if you're going to go in that area. And I also look and say, there's been several studies that have been done, and I think on average, I think a student going in changes his major or her major at least once. About 82 or 83% of the students change.
Mm-hmm.
So not having an idea of what you want to do, but at the same time, in a lot of cases, running up the loans really puts you in a position where you see a lot of people graduating and they still have to be trained. They're not trained
Yep.
for what we call the real world. And there's only so much anyone really can do, but it really starts with having a foundation and understanding how to communicate even with kids. I always said a lot of times adults will have with their young person that say a freshman, sophomore, junior, they'll wait to their junior year to say, well, what are you thinking about where to go to school? And the student may say, well, I want to go to Harvard, I want to go to Vanderbilt, or somewhere where it's just not going to be able to make it from an affordability standpoint. And these conversations have to be started a whole lot earlier.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I've nothing against schooling. I think it's just it's unfortunately, as you said, like there's a lot of lack of direction there, and I think that the you're pulling in these loans for an uncertain outcome, and I think it unless you are definitively decided on what you want to do and that path requires college, maybe you wait, maybe you take a little time, maybe you work, do some apprenticeships, like you said. I think, and it's interesting. I mean, as someone who did a lot of schooling and kind of followed all of that through, I have 2 young kids, and I just don't. It's okay. If they don't go to college, it's okay. I don't have a problem with that. Like, we need to figure out what you want to do with your life and how you want to be, sort of that. Productive person. But if that doesn't include college, that's totally fine with
Jason?
me. So understand completely what you're talking about. So you went into the Army as that was a financial decision, basically, when you kind of received that letter?
Yeah, so it wasn't on the top of my priority list to really go in the military when I was getting out of high school, or typically when a lot of people do. But I saw the value in it because I think I was kind of structureless when I was in college, and I thought if it would be a way that I could be trained and have a skill that I could use moving forward. And it's not necessarily what you're trained on in the military, it's more the structure of the military, whether it's being able to really communicate. There's people from all different socioeconomic backgrounds in the military. And that's probably one of the better things that the military creates, is an environment where you learn from other people with completely different backgrounds. And I think, I would say that I learned more the time that I was in the military than probably about 10 times as much as I did in college. And, part of it was just me not necessarily taking college seriously the way I probably should have. And, there's no backing out when you go in the military. You have to start what you signed, the agreement. And, again, it presents a lot of opportunities and a lot of experiences, good and bad, that you wouldn't get anywhere else.
Sure. Oh yeah, I'm sure it is. I never served. I have a lot of friends that have. I think it's certainly a unique experience and very valuable in a lot of ways. How so? Have student debt. We know there are programs in the military to help sort of get rid of that student debt. But did you learn more about sort of finances and pursuing the career of financial planning because of the military? How did it come after? How did
I,
that work?
yeah, so I would say really when I was getting out of the Army, I was looking at different professions and looking at different opportunities. And I had a few friends who had work in or still work in the financial services industry. But there was firm I went to work for. They actually trained me. I went through a program for 3 years and really learned it as a skill. And I was always interested in it because it requires constant learning and constant, I would say, growth, because there's always change. That's the one thing that is certain, whether it's, I would say in the military or in the financial services industry, there's constant change, whether it's the regulations, whether it's adjusting to the market trends and the market, movements, and just the general population and demographics as they age. So I was always interested. I didn't really have any experience growing up with the stock market, investing, or anything like that. But I had a lot of interest in it because I thought there were a lot of, it's one of the businesses, kind of like real estate, other areas where if you work really hard, if you find good people, mentors, people that you can learn from, you can do very well. And there's not really any cap on the upside or on the opportunity.
Yeah, sure. That makes a lot of sense. So I know, kind of, and I think you've alluded to it, your bio talks about, sort of your passion about, I guess, addressing financial literacy in young people. And I share that with you. It's something that I didn't have any, training or anything like that. I didn't really have a retirement plan or anything until, probably I was around 40 when I started to think about this stuff seriously. And so I get very, very excited and passionate talking to especially the younger generation because of the power of time and compounding your investments over time. So I wondered if you would kind of go down that road and talk
Yes.
about, why that's passionate or why you're passionate about that as well.
Yes, because I mean, it's easy for someone to go on, whether it's on Reels or whether it's to go online and see, whether it's real estate or investments or starting a business. They often make it seem like it's very simple, and in most cases it's anything but, but
Right.
it comes down to the root of at least being able to accumulate some savings. So that you can, set goals. What are you looking to try to do? And what you want to do is you want to develop habits that go from that. And when you accomplish a goal, you move on to the next one, and in a lot of cases, it's just initially saving, whether it's for a down payment on a rental property or whether it's for just setting up an emergency fund, something as simple as that. Very few people were even able to do that. And part of it is, I think it is an indictment on the education system, getting back to that, in the fact that there are so many classes that are unnecessary that, there's only about 22 states even now that have a financial literacy course that's mandated for graduation. And, unfortunately, there's been plenty of studies. Price Waterhouse did a study recently, and of the survey, based upon the way the millennials answered the questions, only about 24% understood just even basic financial topics. So, it's a world where there's plenty of information out there. You can go on the internet and get, 330 million hits about different financial topics, but it doesn't really often apply to you. And it's very generic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, kind of where you're going with this. Correct me if I'm wrong, is having someone like yourself to help with that plan, someone who has actually put in the time to be able to, sort of effectively communicate to you, listen to your goals, listen to what your pain points are, and kind of build a structure and a plan for you and your future.
Yes. And I think whether it's me, someone else, or even just reading, what my intention with the book was to really build a framework for someone that is graduating college or even high school for that matter, that was like myself. I really no idea whether it's student loans, whether it's, if you have to get a credit card, what do you even look for? If you're looking to buy a car, how do you even do that? Healthcare, I could keep going down the list. And what I tried to do was make a framework where someone that was very little or any knowledge could kind of work through to get to the other side of it. So at least to have tips, there's QR codes, just ways that you can go in and try to look and apply it to yourself. And that's really what you need to do. The other thing is, if you enjoy something, you enjoy a certain part of savings or finance, or you're looking to try to do something, there's plenty of groups out there, whether they're online or in the area that you live in, where you could find, I mentioned before, a mentor or someone that has experience that can try to teach you or try to show you the profession or what you're looking to try to do before you invest too much time into something that's just not going to work out.
Yeah, great points. I mean, the information, it's hard to say with honestly with almost anything in this day and age that the information is not available to you, but almost in a way sometimes that makes it harder because there's so much information available, and it can be conflicting, right? There's people all over people all over social media that are like, do you have the Dave Ramsey's that's like no debt, dude? Then you have people that are investing, and it's like you need to put all your money into investments, and it's probably somewhere in the middle, but like really it's hard to sort through all of it.
It is. And I mean, I can use the example of one of the more confusing areas of anyone's life, and it's healthcare, and it's whether it's, you're graduating college and you're trying to figure out, should you keep on your parents' plan or family's plan? Mm-hmm. When do you shift to your plan? You can do that up to 26, or even someone that's getting ready to retire with Medicare. It's just so muddy and so in the weeds. Yeah. That it's just very difficult to kind of parse through and find the information that actually applies to you. And, that's with the book, I think there's information out there, but as you mentioned, like most things these days that are media driven, it ends up being somewhere in the middle. And it's really, where is it the middle for you? It really comes down to really setting goals. And, and sometimes people get so focused on, whether it's retiring, what's my number? How much money do I need to accumulate? Or, how much can I take out every year? They get so focused on the numbers that they forget the first thing you want to do is you want to set goals that you even understand what the outcome is. And I think, it's lost often that the basis for achieving things, I believe, is through goals and just developing habits.
Yeah. And without some level of understanding, it's even hard to set those goals. You mentioned the healthcare thing, and it's like just a personal example. I had 6 months ago now had an MRI on my knee. I don't even remember exactly why I sort of figured this all out, but I sort of accidentally came across the option of self-pay or I have a high deductible, like a health savings account type of plan. And so long story short, what it came down to is it actually cost me less money out of pocket to not go through insurance. Like it was such a like half as much money. It wasn't even it wasn't like it was a few less dollars. It was substantially less money to not use my insurance on that particular event. And it's just like stuff like that you don't know. And you don't even know to ask. You're like, well, if I have insurance, I should use my insurance. It's just confusing.
Exactly. And I mean, I use the example of the high deductible plan. They can be great starting out when you're young, but at some point, if you start having health issues, you can get upside down pretty quickly with the deductibles and everything else that go along with that. And so, like a lot of things with finance, pretty much every area, it's not a one size fits all. And whether it's your office coworker or whether it's a family member, their advice isn't always appropriate for your specific set of circumstances. And that's why I always have believed from a CFP standpoint and just being independent and acting in someone's best interest in a fiduciary, you try to make you try to get them where they want to be to achieve their goal. And I really think that, if I can look at something that says why I'm happy doing what I do, it really centers around that. Because, whether it's buying your first home, whether it's feeling comfortable about retiring, and on, there's a lot of sleepless nights across the country with a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of kind of fear, in some cases, even unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah. The book title is Your Future Is Now, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So I think maybe it's in some way intuitive, but why'd you title it that? And maybe how you apply that to your clients?
Yeah. So, I mean, I really look at it, and a lot of people will say, I'll get around to it. Or, they'll either say, I'll get around to it, or you get too far down the road and say, well, I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have bought rental properties, or I wish I would have saved more, when I was in my 20s, like you mentioned. I mean, I always suggest the last chapter, I have these 15 financial foundational tips, and they're really more for parents and grandparents of young children, because they're tips really to try to set the student or young person up when they get to adulthood to be prepared to manage their finances. And I think that's really something that is really lacking and missing. And some of it is, these days, most families are if you have two people in the household working, they're both working. And so when you put between the work and the student activities, you have very little time to just talk about just simple things. And I use the example, like, in the summer or in holidays, one of the best things that you can do is just say, well, we're not going to use the phones tonight. We're going to play Monopoly, or we're going to play Life, or, different games that actually really apply to what what it can provide some real lessons. And so I think sometimes if you can step back from all the noise and really just spend time, with your family. And we've always said, I mean, the biggest thing in the world that you can do is communicate. And I think that's what's often lost, whether it's in a relationship or even with your children. If you don't communicate properly and you don't listen to what they say, they're not going to listen to what you say. And so I think, of all the lessons I've learned over time, is that communication is key, and just listening is trumps pretty much everything, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And it sort of piggybacking off that, and earlier on, we talked about, kind of school debt and that whole process. And I would guess that the, sort of the student loan processors, the colleges, like their argument to saying, don't take this debt on, what it is, well, this should be on the parents, it's their responsibility to, but the reality is most parents don't know either. Like, it's not it's not just the next generation that doesn't know about finances, it's all the generations that don't know about finance.
Exactly. And I mean, and this is something that most people had not experienced up until a couple of years ago. We have this thing called inflation, and it's coming across goods and services now. But the reality of it is education and healthcare. Those are the two areas where there has been more inflation than we could ever imagine over the past 15 or 20 years. And part of it is the government just having an open purse, if you will, and just backing all these loans without really, like we mentioned before, having outcomes. And, it's difficult to talk to, really where you just wake up one day and say, well, I'm going to start talking, to your young person or child about college and about these things. They're always going, I've said to kids now, they barely have a second to breathe, let alone to have an actual conversation because of all the activities that they're in. But, I think it's important to do that and really to set expectations. And I think, it's a challenge for the parents, because I think a lot of parents, especially with the first child that is at the point of looking for college, most parents hear about the cost and everything, but they don't really understand it when you look at the numbers of it. And, with a lot of families, the parents in particular haven't even really saved enough or even close to their own retirement savings. So to think that they can just come up with, $35,000 or $40,000 a year out of their pockets to pay for an institution, I think is really unfair. But it's just expected in some cases, which is really unfortunate for, the parents as well as the student.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know if it's because I live in California or what, but I see a lot of people, it's not just California. I see a lot of people that putting their kids in private schools before college, right? So they're essentially paying a college tuition starting at who knows what grade, like some of them, as soon as they go to school. And I keep asking this question because I have young kids. My son just started, school. He's 5. He just went through his first year of school. He went to public school. And I'm just having a hard time believing that kids that go to private school throughout versus kids that go to public school are so much better off in terms of, what I keep being told when I ask this question is, it's about the opportunities. And okay, so I'm not even arguing the point. My question though is, if people are spending $20, $30, $40,000 a year on their kids' education starting at kindergarten, first grade, would they not be better off had you invested that money?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think there's any question about that. Not only from an and again, I think one of the things that I see is, I certainly believe. I mean, in certain cases, if you're in certain areas, especially in certain cities, the private school might be your best, really only opportunity if you're in a really urban area where
Sure.
the schools aren't very good. But in general, most of the schools are pretty good. It's more of an issue of, if your child starts having issues, with their classes, or they just have learning issues, I think certainly private school makes sense then. But certainly, everyone has a finite amount of resources. And I think sometimes everybody's trying to keep up with everyone else. And there's not really to take a step back and say, well, if the 30,000 a year that I'm putting towards private school, if I did that over a period of time and I had some interest on that, what would that mean? Whether rather than trying to figure out how I'm going to get them through college, you probably could pay for college as well as graduate school. And one of the things I always tell people, I mean, if you can encourage the student to take basic classes at community college and try to get them to take AP classes where they can get credits, the more that they do that, if you can incentivize them to do that, you can either try to talk to them and say, I can help you with a first home purchase, or I can try to help you if you want to go to medical school, veterinary school. I can help you with that as well. Because we always have this conversation about, well, how much it's a question of outcome with a lot of these universities. Is a $50,000, $80,000 a year education, any better than, say, something that's 15, 10,000, something where you end up without any debt, unless it's something that's very, your biomedical engineering or something like that. I mean, I think in most cases, you have to really take a step back and say, what is, if you want to be, if you want to be an artist, or if you want to be, even an educator, there's certainly nothing the matter with that. But does it make sense to come up with all these loans and really put yourself in a position where you can't transition to adulthood because you can't afford anything other than the debt payments, which is, it's just really sad and unfortunate.
Yeah. And I mean, to be clear, like, this is not a judgment as far as what people do with their kids. In a lot of ways, it's like, I have kids. I don't intend to send them to private school. Am I doing them harm? Like, am I truly doing them harm by not sending them, or can I invest in them in other ways? It's just like, to me, it's like, if we don't ask those questions of ourselves in our own situation, then, and I agree, like, there are going to be places where maybe it's safer to go to private school,
Mm-hmm.
or it's, there's a specific reason why you might be doing that. But for just to go to say you are going, I'm just not sure that, and I don't know. I don't know if there's data out there that says children that go through private school are, X percentage more successful than those that go through public schools. There's obviously a lot of other factors that go through life, but it's one of those things that you just hear a lot about. What's I'm a parent. Like, it's always like, well, what's the best thing to do for my kids?
Exactly. And sometimes what doesn't, sometimes what some people view as the best thing is not the best thing. And and there's plenty of, and I will say, in certain private schools, everybody is the same. They're driving the same cars. They kind of look the same. That's not what life is. And, I think the benefit of, just public education is you're surrounded by all different types of, similar to the military, all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds. And you have to get along. And I think, there's something to be said for that. And you start looking at the savings as well that can go along with that. Unless, like I said, there's other variables involved. I think the more that you can save for them, the earlier that you do, the less issues are going to have, whether it's, being able to help them because there'll be money there for a first time home purchase, which most millennials, they can't even do because of all the debt they're paying. Any money that they have coming in is just going right out the back door, unfortunately.
Yeah. And that's where, I mean, your book title, Future is Now. I mean, if you think about this, like if as parents, we are financially handcuffing ourselves by trying to send our kids to private school or college or whatever it is. So you're essentially, ignoring your own future retirement needs. And then our kids get out with all of the student debt and jobs that they can't, sort of manage that. And so then now the parent generation, as they age, they can't take care of themselves. So now that financial burden gets passed down to their kids who already can't take care of themselves. It's just like this snowball that if you don't think about it now and start to like live your life with that, 30, 40 years from now, it's going to be a compounded problem. Whereas if you're saving and investing now, 30, 40 years from now, that those savings and investments have grown. And it's just, I mean, again, like I didn't think about any of this stuff until I was 40. So it's like, that's why I get excited about it. Cause I'm like, I probably missed 20 years of time that I could have been doing, or even if I missed 10 years, like that's a substantial change.
It's significant because of just, the earlier that you start, whether you save for college, whether you save for goals, the harder it is to make up for the lost time. I mean, compounding is it's the magic dust, we would say, in terms of just being able to, be able to really build wealth, compounding, whether it's, holding real estate, whether it's putting money into investments over the long runs, the way to do it is by starting early and doing it often. And, I look at it and really what I try to say in the book, especially for parents, it's very difficult. And the longer that you wait to have these financial conversations, if you wait till they're, like I said, applying for college and you're trying to figure out how in the world to even fill out the FAFSA, that's way too late. It's really a matter of trying to really give them opportunities to try to figure out what they want to do within reason early on, whether it's doing certain internships or they just do shadowing, to see if they want to be in a specific profession, even if they even like it, or they're just like, thank God I did this because I could never see me doing that every day. And it's, and like I said, really managing college expectations, to find something that really is going to work both financially and, and not only from an outcome standpoint, but also from a debt level, because there's just too many people coming out with way too much debt that's really creating a situation where, they can't even start families. And it's just really, really an unfortunate story that we see too all often here in America.
Yeah. Can't start family, can't buy a house, can't do the things that they probably dreamed of as they were going to school for that particular degree and job that job was going to give them. And they've got so much debt that they can't then achieve it. It is a sad scenario. Well, Jeffrey, I want to switch gears. I want to ask you the questions I ask every guest.
Sure.
The first one is based on the name of the show being Know Your Why. So I always ask everyone, what is your why? What's driving you? What's pushing you forward to higher levels of success?
Yes. So really what I get excited about is the results that I have with clients when there's a positive outcome. When we put money aside for a specific goal, whether it's, sending their son or daughter to college, or whether it's just putting money away over a 20-year time frame to be prepared to retire. When they're able to do that and they don't have the stress and being, when I've come across, and when I meet people, a lot of times they say, I've been worried about this, I have trouble sleeping, I'm just concerned. I don't know. I don't know what all this means. I say a lot of times people collect investment accounts, various financial pieces. It's kind of like a puzzle, and they collect them like antiques. So what I try to do, and I get excited about, is really helping them put all the pieces together and making them make informed, or helping them make informed decisions that will help them sleep better at night.
Yeah, that's great. Tell us something about yourself that isn't common knowledge, special skill, a hobby, something to let the listeners know you a little better.
So, I like to travel extensively, and, and it's kind of, I never, when I was growing up, but the first time I literally went on an airplane when I was, I think 22, when I was going in the Army. That's the first time I was in an airplane at 22. And now I see kids when I'm at the airport, they're like 3 or 4 or 5, and they're sitting in first class,
Yeah.
flying out. So, I think the thing that I've learned over time, the more you travel, the more as much as we talk about, the debt and all the issues that we have here, and all you have to do is to turn on the news and see all the problems, it still is the best country in the world, and you have the most opportunities here. And I think one of the ways that you understand that is by going to other places, especially when I was in the Army. Some of the places that I went there, I just, your heart goes out to the people that are in these places, and they just were born to the wrong place, and they don't have anywhere close to the opportunities that we have here. And so, if I would say to anyone, if you can get a passport and you can travel a little bit, you'll feel a whole lot better about a country here.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. When people hear this and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Sure. I have a website. It's jeffreypanik.com. I'm also searchable via Google, like, most people. But, if you want to start a conversation, you have questions about specific things about the book, I'm always available to answer. And really what I want to try to do is make the book a resource. And like I said, really kind of a blueprint, because throughout, whether someone's graduating high school, going into college, graduating college, or starting their career, it is a minefield of it's a whole lot easier to make mistakes than do things the right way, because of how confusing everything is.
Yeah, agree. I'm gonna sort of put a little spin on the last question I typically ask. I want to get your opinion on, you've mentioned doing activities and talking with your children about, starting to introduce, these financial topics to them. When do you think that should start? Like,
so I
certain
think it
age or
sure. So I really always say, one of the easiest ways to start is really to get a plastic, we would say, like piggy bank, if you will, that's clear. And as they do activities and things that you ask, you put some money in there and you watch it accumulate over time. And what it shows is, if you do work, you can be rewarded for it. And then usually what I say at some point, you want to add a second jar really for, volunteer work, putting money aside, where you say, if you like a certain charity, what do you like about it? And you try to help them find something that they want to, whether it's working at a food bank or going with them to work at a food bank, anything that keeps them off their phones. But at the same time, really having a process where you just don't throw everything at them at one time. And I think sometimes, parents, like I mentioned, they get to 17 and 18 and they're like, you've been running around so much, taking them from activity A to activity B, that you forget, they're going to go to college and they're going to be gone. How do I talk to them when they're gone? The earlier that you start, the better. And sometimes it's just about, saying, just talking to them about what they're worried about and saying, these are some of the mistakes that I made. If you can say, just sometimes they look at you and they think you've done everything right. And, in most cases, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
And so the more you kind of humanize, the more you humanize yourself to them, you're going to be in a much better position because they'll feel comfortable telling you, or if they have a question about finance or something else, they're going to be open to coming to you about it. And it's even like I said with the games, whether it's a grandparent or parent, if you can just play simple games like Monopoly and Life and just talk about, it's, you either go through trade school or you go to college, what are the two even mean? And then through the process, whether, you pick up children along the way that are game pieces, or you have to pay for specific taxes throughout the whole thing, it can kind of help them maybe understand a little bit, not necessarily of what real life is, but understand that they have to start thinking about it at least.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have, is there a minimum age? I know we want to start as early as possible. Do you feel like there's a certain age where they're cognitively able to understand some of the concepts?
I would say it's, you get into 7, 8 range. Okay. I think you could start really show, and again, sometimes it's just, if you can provide a good example, like start doing volunteer work, even going to the food bank or serving Thanksgiving dinner, doing certain things where they're at least with you, where they can see you helping out in the community. I think that goes a long way for them understanding there's just, I think sometimes with the influencers and the things that are online, I think sometimes kids just think A, that they think it's going to be easy, and B, they think that, there's hard work is often lost these days. And I think if you can provide a good example, that can go a long way for them really putting the pieces together as well.
Yeah. And I really love what you said about just, letting them know that you haven't done everything perfect. It's because my kids do think that. My kids think they still think I can fix everything. It doesn't matter what breaks. They still think I can fix everything, and it's you want them to think that, like, it's great to be looked at as that sort of superhero to your kids, but at the same time, it sets up maybe the expectation that they will also have to be superheroes, and that there's and so and this applies to, I guess, everything, but yeah, certainly on the financial side of things.
And a lot of times I've seen situations where you have whether it's law, medicine. I have clients who are doctors, lawyers, even people in my profession, that they just the children just think that they have to go into that. They can't go outside of that because that's what's expected. And I think that's a whole nother issue. I mean, I think, we're so focused on, whether how much money you make or what do you do? That's the common question. Like, you meet, if people don't know you, they say, what do you do? Well, it's more of a question, are you happy with what you do? And I think that, unfortunately, and there was another study that was done that actually said that 62% of people surveyed said they wish they would have majored in something else in college, which, with talking about all of this, it's, I think relatively obvious. But, really, if you can find something that you're happy that you do, I think everything else good will come from that. If you're in a situation where you're just miserable for 25 or 30 years waiting to retire, that's just not really a good life, I think, for anyone.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Maybe the what do you do question should be switched to who are you? Something more, more, a little bit more meaningful than just what our jobs are. So
yes.
Jeffrey, this has been great. I love this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing everything that you did. I really appreciate your time.
No, thanks again, Jason, for the opportunity, and I appreciate the time today as well.
Yeah, and folks listening, I know you're going to love this episode. Please like, rate, and review the show so we can get more great guests like Jeffrey. Thank you all for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?